Streets don't love nobody. Gotta find a new route to make it out, man, cause streets don't love nobody. Used to think it was all good, but I found out the hard way. Streets don't love nobody. Used to think the streets was all I knew, but streets don't love nobody. Nah, streets don't love nobody. What's going on, y'all? I'm Vince.
For Viggz.
Welcome to the new year, first episode. Guess we can call this season 2.
And we back with a new guest.
Let her introduce herself.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Felice Belle. I am a poet and a playwright, and I work with a storytelling nonprofit called Narrative4, which is how I met these guys.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks for coming out.
My pleasure.
Guest. Appreciate, all the help and partnerships we had with Narrative4 throughout the years. You want to tell them a little bit about Narrative4 and your position in Narrative4?
Yeah, of course. So Narrative4 was co-founded by Lisa Consiglio and Colin McCann, who is an Irish novelist. And we work with young people to help them harness the power of their personal stories to create change in their classrooms, communities, and beyond. And we do that through something called a story exchange, where you are partnered with somebody you may or may not know. You share a personal story from your life with them. They share a story from their life with you. And then you retell your partner's story in the first person as if it's your own. And it's an exercise in building empathy, compassion, and community. So I started out as the director of marketing at Narrative4 back in 2019. And in 2022 or 3, I moved into my current role as director of the Artist Network.
Okay, cool. And what's been your experience when you're working with youth? Because I know y'all also do like an exchange program where y'all bring kids from Kentucky down here and you'll like swap.
The first time I met the Reality Poets was actually in 2019, I think right before the pandemic started. We had a field exchange program between a high school in the Bronx and a high school in Kentucky. And so the students would be in conversation with each other throughout the year. And then for 1 week, the Kentucky students would come here. And for 1 week, the Bronx students would go down south and get to know their classmates' communities and their actual lived experience. And so we came to Kohler for a session with the Reality Poets. I think you all performed and did a writing workshop with our students. So yeah, I think, I don't know, in America, especially right now, there's so much division. And one of the pleasures of working with young people is that they don't come with the same baggage adults come with. They're willing to just get to know each other as human beings. Right. And it doesn't matter that, like, you're from this political party or that political party. It's like, once I know you and your story, like, I care about you in a different way. And so I saw that every time with each class of students that we worked with.
I know the first time that we met y'all, and you, like you said, the way y'all tell y'all stories is like, you gotta tell the other person's story or whatever. Like, that was real different. We never did nothing like that, so that was the real different experience for us.
Yeah. And I think it's a different experience for most people because there are very few spaces where people sit and just listen to one another. Like, you might do that with your family, you might do it with your friends, but somebody you never met before, just like sit and listen to them without like checking your phone or thinking about what you've got to do next. There's not a lot of room for that in our lives, and I feel like that story exchange circle, there's something really special or sacred about it where people are just focused on that deep listening to another person's story.
Yeah, and I think it, like from my experience, my first time doing it with somebody I didn't know. It was over Zoom. Karen, matter of fact.
Karen Hollins.
Yeah, shout out to Karen.
Yeah,
Karen. Me and Karen became real cool after that.
Yeah.
And it was like Var said, it was different. And then you come with the worry about like the story be so deep you don't want to mess it up. It's your turn to repeat it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you trying to tell it word for word like the person said it to you.
Right.
And like you said, you trying your best not to fuck it up.
I feel like that's a fear a lot of people have is they want to do their partner story justice, right? It's like this person was kind enough to share this personal thing with you. you don't want to mess it up when you tell it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we encourage people to do is give themselves a little grace when it comes to that retelling. It's not, even your own stories, you don't tell them the same every time. So you're certainly not going to tell this person's story you just met the exact way they told it. But we like to say, like, hold the story like a newborn baby, right? Like, if you care about the telling of your partner's story, you give yourself grace, they give you grace. If you mess something up, it's okay, right? Because we want to get to, like, the emotional truth, right? The heart, the spirit of what that story is that was told.
Yeah, and what it done for me is, like, especially after the first time, where I knew, like, how to do it and what to listen for in a person's story. And like I said, first time doing it was with Karen, and me and Karen became, kind of cool after that, where she reaches out, asks me how I'm doing, or if she's here at one of your events, she runs up to me. After years of seeing, like, we just, been knowing each other for years, but that really created, that relationship. I would say besides that time, one of my other favorite times was when we did it right here during the pandemic in the church.
Oh, I wasn't there for that, but I saw the video.
Yeah, that was a fun experience with the cameras, and real professional fun experience. That had me nervous also, like repeating somebody else's story.
Right.
And you got all this film crew around you,
And we sitting in the circle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you guys also had, was it Sean Leonardo, an artist who came and did some work with you all that time?
Yeah.
And it was the first time those students were able to gather in person, right? Because of the pandemic, they've been on Zoom for so long. Yeah.
So how do you think, like, what is some of the responses you get back from the children about their experience in the program?
One of the things I hear a lot from kids, especially if they're paired with an adult, is that they feel like they've never been listened to like that, right? Because they're kids, their opinions and their stories and their experiences aren't always given the same value that we give, like, adults in the room. And so to feel like an equal or a peer to, like, your teacher who's telling a story or somebody that you just met. So I think, one, feeling like there's a value to their story maybe they hadn't seen before, and two, understanding that there are people there who want to listen to what you have to say, right? And then I always think there's this other piece that happens where, like, hearing your own story told back, you might see your experience or your story in a different way. And so, like, it's layered. But one of the things I think the young people get the most is, like, this is a starting point, right? It doesn't stop here. It's like adults might have to do this. Teachers might have to do this as a professional development and say, okay, that's cool. Maybe I don't want to do it again. But I think for kids, it really sparks something where they're like, oh, I have more stories to tell, right? That was one story, but I've got another story. Or like those young people who come in and they're like, I don't have a story. It's like, look, if you are a human being, your life is made up of thousands of stories. You always have a story. You're going to make more stories. And so.
But yeah, I also think it's like putting myself in these shoes, not really wanting to, by not knowing, how it can help you, like just being shy, But the times doing it with youth, like I see like how excited, and especially if they did it before, like they be knowing how to do it better than us, And I think that's great for them because living down south, especially Kentucky, that's like deep, and then coming to get this New York experience, and then these New York youth going down there getting that. I think that's great because it's a whole. Me, somebody that lived in the South when I was young, from New York, like it's a whole different experience. Yeah. Like I never been to Kentucky, but I know like that's South, like deep.
Yeah, I was actually supposed to go in March 2020, right before the city shut down.
Wow.
We had a trip planned that we didn't get to take. But to your point, I remember the kids from Kentucky coming up here and the kids from the Bronx, like, telling them what a bacon, egg, and cheese was. And it was just something that's not something they have there, right? Or people don't, not like we have it, right? Like, everybody knows what it is here. And then the kids from Kentucky would always talk about the holler, which is like a part of where they lived. And the kids in the Bronx were like, we don't know anything about, like, what's a holler, right? And so just having this, like, experiential experience, right, with somebody else's life.
Difference, yeah.
Yeah, because I actually follow one of the kids from Kentucky, and he's a grown man now.
Yeah.
You know, I forget his name, but he's a grown man with girlfriend, everything. Now. And I'm like, damn, I remember when he was in high school.
Yeah.
And he came up.
I follow one of the students on Facebook, and she's now, I think, engaged. She's in med school, right? Like,
Wow.
I remember you when you were just a baby.
Yeah. How important is this program for the youth?
I mean, we had a story about Narrative4 on the Today Show, I think last year. And at the end of the segment, the anchor said, Narrative4 should be in every school in the country, right?
Oh, great.
And I was like, part of me thinks that's true. Like, it might not actually be a fit for every school, right? Like, but I think empathy, compassion, listening, all of these are muscles you can build as a human, right? So what does it mean for young people to learn how to be more compassionate, learn how to listen more deeply to somebody who's different from them? What kind of adults do they become if they have that skill and if they start exercising that muscle young? That to me is really interesting, right? So when you say how important is it, I think it's very important, right? I wish some of our leaders had this training so that they could exercise those skills in their leadership roles. Part of our staff recently just went to the Vatican and did a program with the Pope. And one of the things that he's talking about this year is that storytelling is a tool that he really wants people to use to inspire good, to inspire change, to speak truth to power, right? And so there's a part of me that believes that everything is storytelling, right? The commercials you watch, the politician's speech, the books you read. And so I think there are stories in American culture that we tell over and over again. Christopher Columbus discovered America, or George Washington never told a lie. That's a story, right? So what are the new narratives? What are the stories we haven't heard? That's actually one thing that I love about you all as a community, the Reality Poets and Open Doors, is that you're telling stories I haven't heard before, and you have a platform to reach so many people, like the documentary you created, right? If you didn't make that, we wouldn't know what was happening in these walls during that time. And then that sort of, it's like a drop in the ocean that has this like ripple effect, right? It moves people, inspires people. All of a sudden politicians are like, oh, I should know what's happening there. Let me talk to you, right? Whether or not they follow through, they show up to say, I didn't even know this was happening. And so to me, your work also speaks to the power of story in like a real lived way, right? Not just an exercise in a classroom.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Also, your work as poets. Can I ask y'all questions now? I feel like
Sure.
y'all be asking me a lot of questions.
Sure.
So I know as artists, you all do a lot. Visual art, poetry, music. And so I'm curious about how you came to your art form or your many art forms and how they're different from each other or the same, what makes them powerful to you, why you continue to do them. It's like 5 questions in one.
I would say, to answer your first question, how I came about it, it just, I would say it fell in our laps. You know, when Open Doors first started, shout out to Jenny Lee, she was just still trying to figure it out, like what it was going to be, you know, but she came up with these writing workshops. At first she was bringing people that didn't really, you know, she was just bringing guest speakers that didn't really
Didn't work out.
match up to what we wanted to do. You know, she brought one guy, I remember she brought about police reform, and which that is a you know, important topic. Yeah, but at the time we wasn't, you know, because
We wasn't into that shit.
Yeah, we know how that goes, you know. So she asked us what we wanted to do. We said first thing was go to speak with children about gun violence, being that at the time most of us, all of us, was injured by gun violence besides Jay, but he got shot in his leg before. That's a joke that we tell him. But yeah, when we started going to schools, and then I think Jenny just came up with the idea to bring in a poet They have these writing workshops.
Yeah. First one was Steven, right?
Yeah,
Oh, I've heard about him. I think I might have met him one time.
yeah, he's great. He's great. He's
Yeah,
great.
Steven was the first one. And then after that, I think we had Joel.
Mhm.
He was basically like bringing out the poetry and everybody, making everybody write. And that's how we started performing through them.
Yeah,
Were you writing at all before them, or this was actually the start of you writing poetry? Was having them come in?
now
A
you
long time ago.
before that wasn't doing no writing, but we figured out it was in us once we realized, the style of poetry that these guys had, that we didn't have to really write about hickory dickory dock,
Yeah.
and mousing up the clock type form of poetry. That we really can write about our life stories. And rest in peace, Tito. He the one that really came up with the name Reality Poets.
That's awesome.
And yeah, we went from there, like especially our poetry when we went to see the kids. I think that's what really got them, because we didn't come in there telling them this what you should do, this just listen to me
Right.
and just hear me out. And then we added the art in that. It just came naturally, formed together naturally. Then we all started doing like our separate, what we wanted to do separately. Like I started learning how to produce music. Jay started with the Adobe, making all our slideshows and movies and things. Taught itself how to do that on that platform.
I've always been into art since I was like before this. So I just started doing it a different way. So like you said, everybody just started doing their own thing.
And you actually did a series of portraits of our students that we shared on Instagram way back when, but it was the kids from the Bronx and the kids from Kentucky. And what tools do you use for your visual art?
I use different apps on my phone, and I just mix them up, and I pair them up. See how it look good. If I think it look good, then that's what I go with.
Nice. Have you been using AI at all? Do you have any thoughts about it? Not a fan, or?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
I think I do have some thoughts about it.
All right. Is that, can we go? Is that, we can talk about AI for a minute?
I've been seeing the things that this thing can do, and I think it's really about to take over. Yeah, you can tell it to do anything, and it does it. Like I was listening to a podcast, and they was saying it's going to mess up the music game, and because all people can say, write me a song about this, and it'll write it.
Yeah.
I
feel like there's somebody who has an Instagram who does that. He'll like have AI create like an R&B song in a 70s style about Drake and Kendrick, and it'll spit out that song. And that's like his, I mean, there's an art to it, right? But to your point, that used to be a musician that had to do that.
Yeah, it takes the creativeness out of it.
Yeah, maybe if I could learn it or whatever, take my time to learn it, then yeah. But right now, it's not working for me.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of writers have issues with it because all of those platforms actually take information from all the writing that exists, right? So if I wrote an article 25 years ago, it's on the internet, AI can like feed that into itself and like spit that information back out in a different form without giving me any credit. And so there's some ethical issues definitely where writing and art are concerned.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's going to,
You said it's going to take over.
So I see you got a book sitting up here.
I got a book.
Let's talk about this book.
Talk about this.
So this is my first book of poetry. It's called Viscera. It came out in 2003 in August. It was published by Etruscan Press. And I also started writing poetry very young. But one place I give a lot of credit to is the New Rican Poets Cafe in New York on the Lower East Side, because that's sort of where I found, not sort of, that is absolutely where I found my poetry community, right? Every Friday night I'd be there at the Slam. If I wasn't on stage, I was in the audience. But I think at the time, the fire code said that room capacity was like 140 people. And on Friday nights, it would just be like more than 300 people packed into a room to hear poetry. And at the time I was going there, it just felt like if I could be any place in the world, this is where I want to be, right? Listening to these poets do these things. Like, people were doing things with language I had never experienced before. And I was like, ooh, I want to do that. How do I get to do that? You know, so it just gave me a seriousness about my craft, but also an understanding that art isn't created alone in a room, right? It's also created in community with people that you love, right? And that my work doesn't exist off in the ether somewhere. It's part of a continuum, right? To like a poet that I love, like Ntozake Shange, who has a history with the Nuyorican, right? I get to stand on the same stage that she was on at some point. My friend Basi, who wrote a blurb for the book, referred to it as a time machine, and I like that description. The first and last poem are about the pandemic, right? So it starts and ends in that period when we were locked down and isolated from each other. And then everything in between is sort of like traveling through time, my own memories, like sort of fictional ideas of like people in conversation with each other. There's like Jay-Z and Obama and Frida Kahlo and Nina Simone talking to each other. Yeah, but I'm very proud of it. It's like one of my a creative highlight of my life, right? Like when you look back at your life, you're like, oh, I did that. Like that's how it
That's
feels.
dope.
Thank you.
Where you come up with the title? What is the title?
Thank you for asking. So, literal translation of viscera means like your internal organs, the things that keep you alive, right? So, intestines, heart, all that stuff. I actually first heard the word though on Project Runway. And so Tim Gunn, who used to be the mentor on Project Runway, was like looking at a designer's clothes. And the designer was like trying to please the judges and it wasn't working. And he was like, you've kind of lost your way. I need you to trust your viscera, right? Like whatever got you here to this point, that sort of like gut instinct around your art, focus on that. And so I wrote it down years ago, not knowing it was going to be the title of the book, but I went through a bunch of different titles. And then I was like, that's it. I kind of feel like the book is my heart and soul in word form, right? I think it's me not thinking about the critics or me not thinking about like all the formal education I had around poetry, but like putting what I love on the page and that being the heart and soul of it. So yeah, trust your viscera, trust your gut. I think it's a good idea for all artists.
Okay, cool. Tell them where they can get it from.
Uh, you can get Viscera at Amazon, or if you don't want to support Amazon, you can get Viscera at bookshop.org, which is a place where independent bookstores from around the country send their stuff. You can get it on the Etruscan Press website, or you can ask your local bookstore to order it. Y'all have a new book coming out.
Soon.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that is, what the process of putting it together is, if there's a title?
We have another poetry book coming out.
Willing and Healing 2,
Yeah.
holding the mic in the middle of the storm.
Oh, nice. And when is it coming out?
It will be out March. We're having our book launch March 20th at Riva Gallery on Roosevelt Island. You know, all are welcome. If you're on our mailing list, you would definitely get an invite. Yeah, this is going to be our second book. Holding the mic in the center of the storm, centered around, you know, like basically what we went through the pandemic. We also, you know, sent out submissions to our community. So we got a few people in there from our community in the book. And if I'm not mistaken, you submitted one.
I don't know.
If I'm not mistaken, I remember you saying you submitted one. If I'm not mistaken, but I hope you did. I hope you in there.
Me too.
Yeah, we just gonna, you know, have the book launch. Bring it to the community, Roosevelt Island first, because that's really who, you know, besides our partner organizations, making sure we was all right, including Narrative4. The community really came together for us. So, you know, we felt like it was only right to, you know, bring it to the community first. But we plan to take it around the city, call it a book tour.
Nice. Maybe we can do something together for the book tour.
Oh, yeah,
We'd love to support.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely love it if y'all had time. Come out that afternoon, you know, to the book launch. You know, it's gonna be nice. We're gonna have, you know, our mentor Stephen Willis there, you know, moderating this show. And yeah, we're gonna have fun. You know, it's been a long time coming, especially for Alex. You know, that I deal with the headache of, you know, getting them printed and dealing with this, you know. He can tell you more about it off camera. That's probably why he asked you who your publisher was.
You need a publisher? Maybe. All right, we'll talk.
Yeah, like I said, we're gonna have fun on the release. Just keep looking on our Instagram website for more information. And we plan on doing a few things around it. But we started having these poetry workshops, well, poetry slam poets, slam events at the library on the island, which
Nice.
a few we had came out real good.
Open mic, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Open
mic.
mics.
That's awesome. All right, so I have another question for y'all. As long as I've known of the reality poets, one of the things that strikes me is that you've never been about art for art's sake. It's always art for a purpose, right? To change yourself, your community, change laws at a government level. Nursing home lives matter, right? And so I'm curious where that comes from, right? Because not all artists are driven by that, but it seems to be a part of your passion and purpose.
Yeah, I would say from our past experiences, our experiences that we're going through now. Yeah, and I feel like somebody got to do it. You know, especially push for change, especially, you know, to show the youth, you know, the consequences when it comes from, you know, being in the streets. And I think it's more of a, like, I would say therapy by getting our words out, getting them on paper, sharing our story, like you said earlier. And, you know, like it's very important to share your story to help others. Like, you never know who you help by just sharing your story.
It's a good feeling. You know, trying to help somebody, knowing that you might possibly help save somebody's life or help them go through a certain situation or end up in a situation like you. You know. So we all, like we said, we all got different stories, different perspectives of things or whatever. So that's how we just go from there.
I love that. I think artists have saved my life constantly, right? Whether it's a poem or a song or a book. So yeah, thank y'all for the work that you do.
Yeah, and going back to it, I think that, you know, it's so much, especially in the music nowadays, in the rap music nowadays, it's, you know, it's a big influence of people getting rich off of violence. Like, especially this generation now, you know, they rapping about what they're doing.
Right.
And really getting rich, and I think that the way we do it is trying to get it to the biggest, the most people, touch the most people possible, especially the youth, you know, because like right now they're influenced by the music, you know, and it's cool to them that these people is really living this lifestyle. But you also see what's happening to them nowadays, you know, they're getting arrested and spending time on their music, on what they said in their music, you know, getting convicted from there. By us pushing, you know, it's definitely artistic ways to express yourself in the same way, but without, you know, giving that negative message.
Yeah. I also think, like, I'm a child of the 90s. So when I was really into hip hop, it was like Native Tongues and Run DMC, right? Like, just I'm old school at this point, right? Like I went to a hip hop 50 show last summer, and I was like, oh, I'm almost as old as hip hop, right? And I was like, all right, that's just the reality. Right. But what I can appreciate about back then was that it felt like there was a range, right? It's like we always had rappers who talked about violence, but there are also rappers that talked about their grandma or going to school or like just like
it was a big difference.
Right. Just like this, it was a fuller picture of our humanity as a people, right? Versus now it is driven by commerce, and like the people who seem to get the most attention, right, aren't necessarily the ones who are talking about anything that is of service, right, or good to the community. And still, like, other rappers exist, right? Like, who are not on those charts. And so, again, I think, like, we need more stories, right? We need stories
Yeah.
that aren't that. And so,
Yeah, like then, if rappers was talking about violence,
it wasn't a good thing. It was like,
it was. But if you listen to them, it's not like today.
right, it
They
wasn't,
was basically saying, "Don't do what I did,
right.
what I'm doing, or don't." You know, it was a message in it. You know, then you had rappers like Tupac. You know, Brenda's had a baby. You know,
Yeah.
you know, he was talking to the young females. You know, so I think that's the difference between then and now. Because I am an '80s baby. I was young in the '90s, but I had older siblings put me on to music. Like it's sad right now, especially what's going on when you can be, you know, like a top rapper, and then you just lose it all. You know, all the millions and everything. And it's like people was counting on you. You got your family, you know, counting on you, and just lose it all. It's just sad.
You end up dead or in jail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The person that be on YouTube and be watching a lot of blogs and be watching blogs on like drill rap, like certain towns. And I was just recently looking at one like in Philadelphia and how the drill rap really raised the violence because they was really talking about people 2 blocks from where they hang out at, having beef with. And one rapper I was looking at and following, then to come to find out he's dead. You know, he was recently killed, you know, but he was, you know, made a name for himself as Mr. Disrespectful. Talking about the dead, rapping about the dead. And he even said it, you know, once I realized I can make money by dissing the dead, and rapping about the dead, you know, and what they call they ops.
That's all the way disrespectful. Yeah, they be going to their graves and all that.
Yeah.
Smoking and taking pictures and all that. That's
rough.
totally disrespectful.
Yeah.
So they looking for a reason to get killed.
Right. It's also like something about the views, right? Like I'll do anything
too.
for the
Yeah,
likes, for the
clout.
follows,
Yeah.
right? And like
That too.
including disrespect the grave, right? Which feels like
That's the
there's
thing.
lines
That's
we
the
won't
thing with
cross.
nowadays. Social media got the world fucked up. It's all about views, views and likes. You know, whoever get the most views and likes, you know.
What's crazy is like I remember my friend telling me about some study about like Instagram stories and how people retain almost nothing from what they see. So like they see it, they get the like, but like then it's gone, right?
Yeah.
Versus like you might have a poem I remember forever, right? And so I think it comes back to value, right? Whose stories we value, where we place our value, what we teach children to value.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's important for programs like Narrative4, Open Doors, you know, to try to change the narrative, you know, at least a little bit.
Yeah.
We saved one person up from the streets, you know, we did our job.
Yeah.
You know, like, my mother used to tell me all the time, you can't save everybody, but, you know, you save somebody, you know, you did some good.
I love that.
Hopefully.
We're going to thank you for coming out. You know,
Thank you for having me. It was great hanging out with y'all.
Yeah,
Appreciate you.
yo, Viscera, you know, go get that.
Come back.
Amazon.
Come back anytime.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll see y'all on tour.
Yeah, definitely.
Congratulations on your new book.
All right,
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, yo, we out.
Peace.
Streets don't love nobody. Gotta find a new route to make it out, man.